You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur.
Come on, y'all!
Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz. And today we are revisiting an incredible interview with a very special chef, Ashfer Biju, the executive chef and food and beverage director at the iconic The Pierre, a Taj Hotel in New York City, responsible for all things culinary. Enjoy this conversation with Ashfer Biju. I understand you oversee all restaurant, banquet, and in-room dining service staff, and you direct a culinary team of 50 cooks and 7 sous chefs. And I believe you were previously with the luxury Taj Hotel resorts and palaces around the world for around 9 years, and that you've now been here for around 6. Do I have all of that right?
Yes,
so far?
You have all that right, and you make it sound fancy.
No, you should be proud. Well, tell me, so where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a little fishing town in Kerala in India. I have a house. My mom still lives there. What we call a river that runs parallel to the sea. Uh-huh. So we actually had access to amazing fish and seafood, and that sort of put my first love into food.
Really? Was this, since very, very young? Do you remember?
I remember interacting with fishermen. Of course, my mom was a great cook, and my entire family, dad, grandfather, everybody was in some way or the other in the restaurant industry.
Oh, really? Would they also fish, or was it more just getting a hold of it?
Yeah,
and cooking?
Fish was more because there was proximity.
Yeah.
And freshness. So there was no way that I could have escaped fish.
That's funny. I remember the first time that I had a vacation in Jamaica, and I went out in just a really basic, rowboat, and we had very simple, it wasn't even fancy fishing poles. It was a stick with it. And, we had help putting on some bait, and I remember catching some fish. I don't remember what they were. And then, the guy who took us out cooked them as soon as we got back. That's when I discovered immediately, to eat fresh fish like that was completely different.
No, there was no escaping. We would, as kids, I'm talking about when I was maybe 8, 9 years old, maybe less, we would walk around, and then there was this fisherman who would catch crabs, and he would just throw the crabs away because it would cut their net.
Oh.
And we as kids would collect these crabs, and when we have, let's say, 4 or 5 of them, we would just, have an older person to light a fire and just grill them.
Yeah.
In live fire and live coals.
And just like that.
And just crack open and, all messy fingers eat them. And that was my first memory of doing something on my own cooking.
Jeez, I realize this is going to be a difficult interview for me because I'm not making this up. I am so hungry right now. I'm salivating.
Yeah, this is great.
I should have eaten before we started this. And I'm so excited because I know afterward I'm going to have meals in the restaurant. We'll talk about that too. So when did you feel that you first got the spark, the passion to actually yourself be involved in the culinary arts? Was it really young?
I wasn't going to become a chef. I was actually about to be enrolled in dental school.
In dental school?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe just 48 hours before my enrollment, I went up to my dad and said to him, listen, this is not what I want to do. And then his question was, what are you going to do then? I said, I don't want to study anymore. I want to work.
Yeah.
And that would land me into one of his friends. He made it a point that he was running restaurants at that point of time.
Oh, okay.
And he made it a point not to have me work for him. And he sent me to a few contacts, and I would end up working for his friend's restaurant for 2 years.
But was that just chance, or did you say, yeah, Dad, I'd like to be?
No, it was sort of, he said, it was just me dropping out of school pretty much.
That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
How long had you gone to school at that point?
No, I'd gone right up to the, you complete something called a pre-degree, which is equivalent to a little more than high school.
Okay.
And then you go to college to become a doctor or whatever it is that you become. So I was going to become a dentist.
And it was right before that you go. How old were you? Were you like 18? Is it similar as the United States?
16 and almost 17 years old.
Okay.
And then I would end up working for this restaurant where I really fell in love with the whole craft. And then I decided that if I were to make something out of it myself, on a serious note, I need to go back to school. So I went back to my hotel school, got myself graduated in hoteliering, which included a chef's training course.
Yeah.
And then I got picked up by a hotel chain which ran a chef's training course called the Oberoi Hotels back in India.
Okay.
And that was a 2 years of chef's training course. And that was it. And then I didn't look back. And then I went to Napa Valley.
Wait, can I back up for a minute? When you say you fell in love with the craft, can you be more specific?
Everything to do with hospitality. I mean, I was running a restaurant. I first started as a cashier.
What, when you were like, oh, I see.
I first started as a cashier because that's the only job I knew, which is to count money. I think I probably knew how to count, 2 and 2 to see it equals 4. And then there was a period when there was no server, so I started serving food. Slowly I got along very well with the chef. So I started helping him out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I got in the kitchen a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then my boss was opening a new sort of fast casual. I mean, I don't even think the word existed at that point of time. Concept. So he wanted me to take care of it with his brother-in-law. So I literally launched a restaurant at the age of 18.
Oh my God. Launched, you mean the business side?
The business side. The business side, including, writing the menus with the help of my boss. And things like that. And I love the whole creative process. And then we were not very profitable because we were very labor heavy.
Yeah.
So we then went back into the drawing board and took some decisions which had me cooking.
Oh, really? Okay.
Along with running the business.
With the particular kind of food that you were cooking at that time?
It was, strangely enough, it was a vegetarian restaurant.
Why strangely enough?
Because now the vegetarian is in.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. This is back. This is back
in 1990, beginning of 1991.
And where is this?
It's in Chennai in India.
Okay.
Of course, that location had a market for vegetarian food.
Yeah.
And then after 2 years of working for this gentleman, who even today, he has about 6-7 restaurants back in India. I had to tell him that, listen, I'm going back to school.
Yeah.
So I went and did my hospitality degree.
And where was that again?
In India.
Okay.
And then in a little beach town called Kovalam, which is really touristic, great location. And then I joined this big hotel group in their chef's training program.
Is this Taj we're talking about?
No, this is the hotel group called Oberoi.
Okay.
It's actually the number one competitor of Taj in Asia.
Oh, okay.
And then I came to CIA, the Culinary Institute of America in Napa Valley.
Oh.
And I was very fortunate to do some stages for some of the chefs, including, some of the restaurants, including Terra, Chef Annie's in Berkeley, California.
Yeah.
And by then I had gotten into a job where my job was to open restaurants.
Oh, interesting. Back to the business side.
Yeah. So, I was still working for hotel chains. But I was opening restaurants, opening food, sort of initiating food and beverage concepts. So I would literally switch switch locations every 2 years or 3 years.
Interesting. And this is in your mid-20s we're talking about.
Yes. So I was in Maldives, I was in Mauritius, mostly in the Indian Ocean Islands. I came to London for a bit. I was very fortunate to work for John George in London for a short while.
What was that like?
Great. It was actually a mirror concept of Spice Market in New York City. He had a restaurant called Rama in London. So I worked there for a while. And I opened about 7 hotels with multiple restaurants. So which was great. And then as part of the whole, pre-opening assistance consultancy that would bring me to New York in 2009, when the Pierre Hotel reopened after their renovation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And that was my first time in New York City.
What was that like for you coming from India? And although you had been to London.
I'd been to London. I spent some time in California. I spent some time in Switzerland because I consulted with a Swiss hotel company in teaching their chefs Asian cuisine.
Oh, interesting. All right.
It was fun. You have this 20-year-old coming and teaching them.
Yeah.
Swiss and France still have where your executive chefs are old. When I say old, they're more experienced. They are very senior.
So they must have looked at you. It must have been a little difficult in the beginning.
It was, but they were very kind. And we had an agenda to sort of, because what they saw is that they saw this was Victoria Jungfrau hotels in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And they saw that their Asian market, travel market was booming. And they were not equipped to cater for that market. So they brought me in as
they still must have been surprised when they saw your age.
So that was fun. So, New York was, I took it as part of my travel circuit that I was in New York.
I see. Oh, that you wouldn't necessarily stay.
I wasn't going to be here.
Yeah.
I just came to help, and I went, I had to, after I spent about 9 months, I actually went back to India after 11 years to open a palace concept in India.
A palace concept?
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
Taj has about 5 original palaces, which were owned by kings.
Oh my God. Like what, for instance? Can you give me some?
Like you have Rambagh Palace. You have, these are in Jaipur, and there was one palace in Hyderabad, which they had rights for, but it was not ready to open as a hotel. And what they did is they were launching this as a hotel, and I was involved in that project. So I went back to do that project, and by then I had sort of done traveling.
Yeah, you were a little burnt out on it, you're saying?
Not burnt out. I have 2 kids.
Oh.
The kids grow up, and then they want more stability than you do.
Yeah.
So I was looking for some place to sort of stay.
Yeah, just kind of settle.
Yeah, and thankfully at that time, an opening at the Pierre opened up, and Bill made a call for me to come back.
Bill Spinner.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to back up for a moment. When you first were in New York City, again, I understand that you have traveled, extensively and the experiences, but there's such a concentration of restaurants in this city from all over the world. Did you make it a habit to go from restaurant to restaurant to experiment and taste?
I did. And which is what I did in every other food city that I've been to.
Yeah.
My wife grew up in Hong Kong, so I've traveled extensively in Hong Kong. And I've lived in London. And to me, these 3 cities are what I call the maximum food cities. London, New York, and Hong Kong.
And Hong Kong, yeah.
So I pretty much did exactly what when I look back, I did exactly what I did on my first visit in Hong Kong and London in New York.
I'm curious.
I had a list.
Yeah. Oh, you did? Oh, okay. And you would hit each one and get certain dishes.
Sure.
Would you actually talk, would you ever talk to the chef? Would you ask to speak to them and things like that?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. For example, I had a lunch booking. This is back in 2004, not in 2009. I had a lunch booking at Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California. And I had lunch. And something hit me, and the next 2 days I had nothing to do. It was a weekend.
Yeah.
And something just said to me that I should talk to somebody and see if I can stage in the restaurant for a day or 2. And I just went out to the restaurant manager and I said, can I work in your kitchen for some time?
Yeah.
And he said, let me ask the chef. So there was a sous chef, and I walked up to him, and he said, "Are you carrying a chef jacket?" I said, "Yes." For some reason, I had a jacket on me.
Okay.
So, and there I was working downstairs in the kitchen in Japanese.
Huh.
So,
interesting.
But yes, in some cases you do, and some you don't. I mean, it's especially when you have had an exceptional meal, you make it a point to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to network and connect.
So when you started here, when Bill helped you to get back in here to the Pierre for an actual job, what was your starting position?
I started as the executive chef.
You came right in at that point.
Because I had spent enough time, and I've known the Pierre.
Uh-huh.
And I was confident of doing it. And while I was here, I was literally, there were some instances where I was taking care of the operations. So we were thorough.
I'll bet. So I'm wondering, Ashfer, I understand you're like a self-described crafter of perishable art. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So we often have this discussion of food being an art, right?
Yes.
So I call food, I actually go a little bit, and I don't know, you can call this the chef's ego or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I actually treat this as an extreme form of art.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, any other form of art, which is even if it's a drawing or a performance, to a great extent, you can capture it and preserve it.
Yes.
Whereas in food, as a chef, we create the art and we see it being just destroyed. I mean, not destroyed, but consumed.
I understand. Yeah.
And that's it. Then it's over. And then the next thing starts immediately.
Yeah.
And how much ever you try to take a picture or write a recipe, it's never captured in its full essence. I would sort of equate it to theater. But that's it. And theater is an extreme form of art too.
Yeah.
I mean, the real true theater, you watch a Broadway show, it's over.
Yes.
I mean, nobody tapes a Broadway show and watches it again.
Or if they did, it's just not the same at all.
So I would, so that's why I call it a crafter of perishable art.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me as an artist, it takes a lot to put so much into a creation and to see it just consumed and over. But what we as chefs have managed to do, and I don't think it was deliberate, is that we actually take pleasure in it being consumed and appreciated.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it provides almost an instant gratification.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at, I love to walk around, whether it's a big event or a wedding, or whether it is a busy service in the restaurant. I love to walk around and look at my clients' faces. I mean, I may not even talk to them, but just looking at the room, I know whether they enjoyed the food or not. Yeah. And that makes me feel great, or not.
Oh, I doubt you've had many nots. And what about the environment? I mean, I'm also thinking, right, it can be such a complete experience in terms of what, not only the smells of the food itself, but of the room and the visuals and the lighting. How do you feel about all of that coming together?
I live for it. Let's just say that. I said, that's what I live for on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost that you as a chef, and I'm sure I'm not speaking just for myself. This is not a profession you get into if you want money or fame. This is a profession you get into only if you love it. I get a high walking around markets. I get a high walking around fishing docks. I see fresh produce and I'm happy. Yeah. I look at a busy kitchen and this is our stage. Yeah.
Well, and what is I'm thinking in terms of also the combination of the artistic and the scientific combining, in terms of, in terms of combining to get the proper flavors and to mold it into something that does bring people into a whole new experience. How do you feel about that?
So there's of course a lot of science in cooking, especially baking. Baking is all science. But I think cooking is, let's just go back to our grandmother's cooking. How much of science did they think about while cooking?
Right. None.
Yeah. Okay. And still we consider them as the best cooks, right? So I think most grandmothers and most mothers are amazing cooks in their own right. And so my point is, of course, there is some science in it.
Mm-hmm.
There is some practices that they might have picked up from the people who taught them to cook.
Yeah.
Which is what I call the science in that example.
Mm-hmm.
But end of the day, it's the love and those are softer emotions which I translate into being art that makes great food.
Yeah.
I mean, if recipes and science could cook great food, then all of us should be, I would be out of a job.
Technically, right. Well, it's interesting to understand, I mean, to, in a sense, improvise, and just know inherently from your experience and the artistic side of you, flavors that can combine in order, almost like a chemistry situation. You write two different kind of chemicals and they together, they combine and there's something else. There's some kind of something that's different.
And what makes it very fluid and organic is the fact that not every ingredient is the same. Not every ingredient in a particular season is the same. Not every ingredient in a location is the same. So there's a lot of variable elements that we deal with as we cook. I mean, a zucchini today doesn't taste the same as a zucchini 3 days after.
Yeah.
I mean, if it is perishable, if it is picked early, if it is picked late, I mean, there's a lot of variables. So, which is why a chef's job is not just to follow recipes. He or she has to typically go on. I mean, the key is tasting. We taste at every step. I'm that crazy guy who walks around eating raw vegetables and seeing how they taste, and then you think about what you can do with it.
God, and yet you're so slim. Well, so what are some of your own personal favorite?
Going back to my childhood, I loved to cook seafood. I got my beginner years, I spent a lot of time cooking classic food, Mediterranean, south of France kind of food. I had a couple of chefs who were from that region. Normally a chef's repertoire is built by who they cooked with, rather than where they went to school or where they're from. So I picked up a lot of those flavors. And if I were to pick one particular section of food that I really enjoy cooking and eating, that is seafood.
It is seafood.
Yeah, seafood, especially with those, what I call as olive oil cuisine, which is, light, flavorful, accents the seafood rather than the sauces or...
I'm starting to salivate again. This is a problem. Oh, gosh. Okay. Yeah, and I know that the meal I'm going to have after we're done is going to be seafood. So
I think you should taste some seafood.
Excited. Yeah. And how does your family feel about all of this?
Initially, when I decided to become a chef, so just going back to when I told my dad that I don't want to be a dentist. The first thing he said to me was, "Don't tell your mom."
What? Interesting.
Because the whole family was prepared to me having a medical career. And now I'm dropping out of school.
Wow. Oh, so, is this also culturally
it's
thing
very
where
much,
the parents are very
correct.
involved?
It's very cultural. I mean, as an Asian parent, you want your son or daughter to be an engineer, doctor, nowadays an IT professional, and whatnot. And here I was a fairly above average student, now wanting to drop out and do something crazy.
Were you scared when it came time to tell them?
Yes and no. My dad was always supportive.
Yeah.
And it worked out. And
so how did he respond, literally?
He was cool. He really was cool. And the only thing that he said to me is that you have to learn things the hard way, and which is why he decided that I'm not going to work for him. I was very fortunate. So then on, they were very supportive. And I was very fortunate to have met my wife, who was at that time in hospitality. And
so she understood the lifestyle and everything, what you were getting into.
Correct. So then we actually traveled together while we were courting and dating, and and
what a wonderful thing to share together.
Yeah, and we enjoy traveling till date, so which is great, and it works out.
I want to get into another topic too. Given all that you manage here, if you could talk about the differences between cooking for a restaurant situation versus a banquet, a large wedding of 200 people, in-room dining. There's real significant differences, aren't there?
Very much, very much. So the restaurant dining is fairly, I don't want to, I actually want to say it's fairly simple. It's not, but it is.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah, in the sense that, you've decided what's going to be the menu and you have a certain amount of prep. You are ready for what you need to do. And they all come, your clientele is in, let's say, table by table, one by one, depending upon how they are. And then you execute. Of course, it takes a lot of hard work in the back.
Yeah.
But it's sort of in a repetitive nature. And once you have a good system that is working,
a process,
it works.
Yeah.
An event like a wedding, especially the way we do it, it involves a lot of planning and precision, because one thing that goes wrong can really put you at
what, for example?
Like food temperatures or the number of meals that you cook. Like most of our weddings have, let's say, a two-way or a three-way choice for main course.
Okay.
Now, you would sort of, from your experience, you would think that I'm going to need, for a 300 people event, I'm going to need maybe 160 of beef and
'cause you don't
100
really know
of fish. You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know. So you do an estimate or a guesstimate, and that guesstimate has to work out. So something like that. And also, these days, I have seen the whole cooking for wedding, especially or a high profile banqueting, has changed dramatically.
How so?
In the sense that, the food is more out there. People have access to, our client base have access to various cuisines, various experiences.
Oh, and they're more educated with the television shows and all of that.
And they would, and soon with a lot of podcasts. And they're very knowledgeable about food. And now, instead of them coming to just a restaurant, we're on a dialogue with them right at the beginning. So we meet our bride-to-bes and grooms-to-bes in an initial planning meeting.
Can you tell me about your whole process? This is interesting to me.
So, my role starts when the menu discussion starts. Of course, Bill my catering directors, either Bill or Mark, they have met with the clients. They've talked about what's the event is going to be.
They've set the stage for
Correct.
it. Yeah.
And then the first thing that we do is, and sometimes the wedding planners are involved. And the first set is we talk about the menu. At that time, Bill would have already sent them our sample menus, which is nothing more than a guiding factor.
Okay.
And they would have looked at the style of food that we do, or that we do the best. And then a conversation starts in terms of what would you like to see for appetizer? What would you like to see for main course? What's the guest list look like?
What do you mean by that? You mean in terms of just, is it people who really know about eating or high profile?
More so with ethnicities and backgrounds.
Yeah.
Like you would look at, for example, we do a fair share of, let's say, Indian weddings. So then the first question that you ask is, are you going to have a lot of vegetarians? Then you have to build the menu differently. And then you would talk about, then you would pick, let's say, then I get an idea of what they're looking for. And then we would make a sample menu choices and send the guest. And then they would pick maybe 5 or 6 options from that. And the next step was a tasting that we do.
That would be my favorite part.
Yeah. A tasting is where, the entire family sits around.
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
So we cook, and we present the dishes. We prepare sampling plates for each attendee. And then we discuss each dishes at length. Now, at that point is when, let's say, a potential bride will raise her hand and say, oh, by the way, I saw this on Pinterest. Can you do this?
Oh, geez. They're coming to party planners and designers with the same thing, a whole Pinterest board.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, oh, by the way, when we were in south of France, we had this amazing lobster dish. Can you do something similar?
How do you handle that? What do you say?
I think it's fine because see, a lot of chefs takes offense with that kind of an intrusion, if you will.
Well, but it's their party, right?
Yeah, because see, I look at food as personal, and that's something that I've accepted and I have come to terms with.
So you've embraced
from a very young age.
Yeah.
Because see, I grew around various food cultures. I grew up around vegetarians. I grew up around people who didn't eat meat, people who were pescatarians, and whatnot. So I was familiar with food choices as a young boy.
Yeah.
So I understand it. I look at food as very personal. If somebody wants a well done steak, so be it.
Right.
It's their personal choice.
Sure.
And the other thing is, it provides me an opportunity for research and for another arena of experiment, which I otherwise wouldn't have done.
That's right.
And then we finalize on a menu. And very rare cases, you have a second tasting if something really changed between the first tasting and the second. And then then the menu is final. And then we will start planning for it.
Yes.
But I'm also very fortunate to have a great team handling that side of business.
Yeah.
And then we would make market lists, and then it's the operational process of getting it right.
I see. And I want to come back to that in a few moments. I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting last May, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So, if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to theweddingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's theweddingbiznetwork.com. You had mentioned, we talked a lot about vegetarians. I would assume that that's more challenging to create a real tasteful experience with vegetables. Am I right?
I'm just going to say no. Because to me, vegetables has so much potential and so much flavor in themselves. And when you come to dine today, I actually want you to taste some vegetarian dishes of ours.
Sure, I would love to.
It's just and this is the one area where I would differ from a lot of my colleagues in the industry.
Yeah,
is that there's this typical opinion of, oh, you're a vegetarian.
Do they look down at them generally?
No, you're having a salad for appetizer. And a lot of event spaces in the city also does that. And I refuse to do it. I mean, I value somebody's food choice as a vegetarian. And I make it a point that as a vegetarian, you have all the right to enjoy food as a non-vegetarian.
I love that.
And because, see, the meat choices are very limited. I mean, what do you eat today as meat? You eat chicken, pork, lamb, beef. Okay. That's it. Gone are those days when you ate partridge or pheasant or, I mean, if you stretch it, duck. That's it.
Okay.
Fish is still not changed. We still have a lot of variety, but there is a study that says, there was actually a TED talk by Peter Greenberg from CBS saying that, I hope I'm getting the percentages right, 60 to 70% of the fish that is eaten in United States are either tuna, cod, salmon, or shrimp.
Why do you think that is? Do you remember why he said?
Because people just choose that.
Yeah.
And then, so soon we're going to get into that meat situation with fish too. Whereas vegetables, if you look at the variety in vegetables,
Yes.
it's huge. I mean, look at the amount of vegetables that we still, even people who don't eat vegetables, eat on a daily basis. So as a chef, if you're able to learn to treat those vegetables right,
Yes.
and cook them and do creative things with those vegetables, there's a
Interesting.
whole lot of potential out there for vegetarian cooking.
You know, I want to ask, so in addition to the entree being vegetarian, maybe this is a naive question, but at all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of weddings I've seen, there's almost always a salad, but it doesn't have to be a salad,
It
right?
doesn't have to be a salad. It shouldn't be a salad. It shouldn't be a salad. That's the bottom line. And we never, I'm very confidently saying that very rarely do we have a salad as a vegetarian.
God, Ashfer, I love this
alternative
idea.
for because there's so many other dishes out there which the day you don't feel like eating meat, do you eat a salad? No,
Right.
I would eat something else.
So do you have to kind of educate, let's say, the bride's mother about this? I assume they kind of just assume the first course is going to be a salad.
No, we actually talk about it.
Yeah.
And in some cases because see, what has changed is when I first arrived in New York, 2009. So this is something really interesting that happened in a short span of, let's say, 7 years.
Okay.
So when I first got here, 2009, I used to help out with the events, although it was not my forte at that point of time. And let's say in a party of 300 people, we would prepare 10 vegetarian meals. Okay. And we probably will be left over with 2. 8 people will be vegetarians out of 300 people. Today, we actually cook 30 to 40 vegetarian meals.
Interesting.
And sometimes we've run out.
Oh, really?
So there is, let's say, and in 5 to 6 or 7 years time, I mean, from 10 to 40.
Doesn't this go along with the whole trend of health and wellness and
It is.
how that's defined in America?
It is. And it's also food choices. Yeah. I mean, of course, people are seeing, the advantages of eating healthy, and they are going for it. And I have I have 4 or 5 very close friends who are vegetarians and vegans by choice, not for any particular religious or cultural reasons.
Yeah.
And they are happy eating. I mean, they of course, they find it sometimes challenging when they go to events and such. But especially in New York City, there are plenty restaurant choices for them.
Yeah, I bet. What about also, I understand that I read somewhere that you're interested in medicinal cooking.
So I come from a region called Kerala in India, a state. So we have an ancient form of medicine called Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is all about using natural products as medicine, which includes food, which includes roots, herbs, spices, and whatnot. So I had exposure to it growing up, although I never practiced it.
Yeah.
Because it's intense to practice it, because then you don't use other medicines.
Oh.
But the fact that each food ingredient has some medicinal value or a harmful factor.
Okay, sure.
That sort of intrigued me. And I started sort of as a personal habit. I started studying it.
Yeah.
And I still keep up with a little bit of that study.
Can you give me a couple examples and certain ingredients?
So in 2013, I went on an interview with ABC Network.
Okay.
And this was not our topic of discussion. Out of the blue, the person who was interviewing me just threw in a trick question on me.
Okay.
She asked me, what's the next kale?
The next what?
Kale.
Kale?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
right.
I was
Gotcha.
like, yeah, what's the next kale? So I'm like, well, this is not part of the script. But it just came to me that I said it's turmeric. Turmeric's going to be the next kale.
Which reduces inflammation, right?
Yes. So little did I know.
Which is the biggest form of disease, right?
Correct. So little did I know that turmeric was actually going to go big and become the next superfood, which it is today.
Well, maybe it's because you said it.
Yeah. So no, it's not because I said it.
No, I'm kidding.
Because I had always known turmeric as
it's powerful.
It's antiseptic.
Yeah.
It is anti-inflammatory. There's a lot of great benefits by consuming turmeric. And as a child, if I had a small cut, my mom reached out to her spice box.
Interesting.
And put some turmeric on that cut. And in a day or two, that was healed.
Wow.
And today, science is now talking about turmeric as the biggest antiseptic ingredient.
Wow. But people ingest it often in the form of pills, right?
Correct.
These days.
I mean, there's turmeric pills now. There's, of course, the turmeric latte has become the biggest craze in California. There's so many forms that people are enjoying it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I mean, now that we're talking, we are in a wedding podcast. So back in India, the brides get bathed in ground turmeric 3 or 4 days before their wedding to ensure a great glow on their skin on the wedding day.
Whoa.
And this has been done in India for ages.
I've never heard of this.
So, and this is, essentially, what is turmeric? It's a food ingredient.
Yeah.
So similarly, each food ingredient has some or other medicinal benefit. And we as chefs have a great opportunity to showcase them in our cuisines.
In some way or another, do you personally ingest on a regular basis some form of turmeric?
I don't. I mean, I do have turmeric as part of my diet, but on honest truth, I don't consciously follow it. And I know friends who does that. I know. I mean, I have 2 or 3 very close friends who start their day with turmeric milk and almonds.
Yeah.
And that's their first thing that they consume. I'm a very bad eater, by the way.
What?
I should say that for the statement. I eat everything. I'm not controlled in terms of what I eat. And I think it's tough as a chef because you cannot follow a diet as a chef. It's tough. You can exercise, but that's about it.
Oh, that's funny. Well, is there any particular educational book, video, some sort of source that you could recommend to people generally just to start learning about medicinal?
There's plenty of books available. Most of them are of Indian, Asian origin. There's one that there's a book called Foods That Heal. I should have prepared and
no, that's fine. We have show notes, and so we'll put this in the show notes.
Yeah,
Foods
I
That
can
Heal.
send
I've heard of
Foods That Heal. There's one called A Life in Balance, which talks about Ayurveda. I mean, what Ayurveda does is Ayurveda just looks at your body as a body type. And it classifies into 3 or 4 body types that you have. And and then it sort of prescribes what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat.
Yeah.
Which sort of makes sense, because all of our bodies are not the same. So there is no one solution for each of our food habits.
Yeah, while you're saying this, I'm thinking about how, and friends of mine, I haven't done it yet, have seen homeopaths, and they'll have a discussion and then get whatever certain kind of herbs, these capsules, drops, whatever it is. I wonder. It seems to me that eventually there's going to be practitioners where you'll go visit and you'll talk about symptoms or whatever concerns,
which does happen. Which is already there in a different part of the world. The bottom line is that, people don't think about it in that way, but you are ingesting food. You're ingesting a foreign material into your body.
Yes.
Now, it has to have positive or negative impacts. And my point is that we don't know the full extent of what those factors are. And it's worth researching and actually benefiting from them. And that's my point. I mean, you can still follow your diet that you normally follow.
Yes.
You can add, turmeric into your cuisine that you every day eat, and you have better skin. I mean, it's very simple. And it's a scientifically proven fact.
Yeah.
I mean, you could include Garcinia cambogia in a fresh form in your diet, and you could probably have better metabolism. And so on and so forth. I mean, we already know that certain grapes and wine varietals have a positive impact on your health.
Yes.
So here you go. So it's all out there. It's a matter. The point is that we're not using it to the full extent.
Yeah, interesting. It'd be interesting to see where this goes. And also another element, another aspect of the culinary arts is the visual aspect. And earlier we were talking about the experience that's being created. Can you talk a little bit about the visual element?
So you do eat with your eyes first?
Yeah.
We all know that. I think it goes beyond visual. The food is an experience. Food is, especially in our business, which is events and restaurateuring.
Yes.
And even at home, food is very experiential. And that experience includes visual, audibles, the setting, the company that you keep.
Yes.
And the atmosphere in general, and the service that you receive. So you enjoy food not just as food, which is why there's this classic example of, I'm not sure who said that, but there's this thing of a glass of native wine in south of France being enjoyed in south of France versus that wine being shipped to United States and enjoying in your living room.
Yeah.
It's two different things.
Yeah. Interesting. That's true. Yeah. I've traveled a lot and yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of people do that. They enjoy a glass of wine sitting in the beach in south of France under great, 80 degrees sun.
It gives it a whole different feel.
Correct. And then the next thing that they do is they ship a case to
but maybe just to bring the memory, perhaps.
Yeah, but it's the experience is slightly different. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the same is with anything with food. So back to visuals. The visual creates the interest of what you're about to eat.
Okay.
And there are some folks who outright either accept it or reject it, which is why the visual is very important.
Yeah.
And I would really take this down to, and I never thought about it this way till I started feeding my young son, who was a very picky eater.
Yes, I have a daughter. I remember. Right, she would look at it, and we would be so upset because she would shake her head no, and it's
correct.
like,
and I would tell him, I said, Zed, you've not even tasted it.
Yeah.
You're just looking at it and saying no.
Yeah,
and
that's huge for kids.
And I would get upset.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then I said, wow, this is my education right now.
Interesting. And then you would have, so would you then,
and
not to trick him, but in a sense, right? If you wanted him to eat certain things.
And then I would, but today he's a little bit more, he trusts me.
Yeah.
When I tell him that, listen, you take a first bite, you're going to love the next bite. So that's, and that kid is in all of us, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And we may not consciously do this all the time, but we sometimes look at certain food products and we either accept it or refuse it.
Yeah.
So that a chef in his craft has to be conscious about that aspect while he's plating or creating food. So it does not, gone are those days where you spend a ton of time decorating food, which nobody does that anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that that's passed. But in general, the food has to look good. But the catch is to strike a balance between what looks good and what you don't have to spend. If I'm looking at a plate of food, I don't want to feel that the chef spent 3 hours decorating that plate. I want the food to have the right color balance.
Yeah.
It needs to look attractive. It needs to look fresh. It needs to speak to me. And then I consume and it sort of connects.
It seems to me like it's almost a different skill. I mean, for me, I'm in music and I think of songwriting, which I used to be very involved in, and writing lyrics versus writing melody. Like a lot of people who don't know, laymen don't even think about that. It's two completely different skills. And there are professionals who are great with lyrics. And then there are professionals that are great with melody and they'll collaborate. Then there's people who are great with both, which is even harder to find.
You do find this in chefs too.
Do you? There are chefs, people who specialize in one or the other.
I mean, it's not so much that it is in the field of music, but you do find certain chefs who are amazing cooks who can create great magic in a pan, but who are not able to translate into a nice visual on a plate.
Yeah.
In my kitchen, I do have some chefs who are great in that respect, and some chefs who are better presenters.
Huh.
And we sometimes use those skills differently to create a magic. And that's,
yeah. Oh, I like that. Create magic.
You have to do that. I mean, that's essential that you identify your strengths within your team and capitalize on them.
So you're talking about the team and in the kitchen. What about the business side of this? You are also managing an enormous team here.
It is, but then we have our organizational structure, which works very well. I have a chef who looks after my banqueting. I have a pastry chef who's amazing. I have 3 of my sous chefs, senior sous chefs, executive sous chefs who are amazing. So we have constant conversations and dialogue. And we distribute our work evenly. We have our own fair share of administrative tasks to do. And I make it a point that we distribute that evenly as well.
Everybody
because otherwise,
has to.
Otherwise, I've gone through a lot of kitchens where you have an admin chef, which does not make sense to me because you didn't join this profession to be an admin person.
Yes, got it.
So we divide that equally. And I have a great. I mean, this is one of the advantages of being in New York City, is that my out of my 50 chefs, I probably have about 21 different ethnicities.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. New York City, of course.
And who's gone through...
And on purpose, right?
Yeah, and who's gone through different experiences, different backgrounds. And they each of them brings something to the table. Whether it is, a recipe or a certain style of food, or their experience or a chef that they worked with before. And my job is just to be aware of what those are, where they are parked, and utilize it. That's it. So I have an easy job.
It's almost like a painter. You are choosing and putting together the palette to work with.
Correct. I mean, I have to figure out. I mean, in music, it is very clear who plays clarinet, who plays drums, who plays this, who plays that.
But still combining them. I mean, my experience with this, there's a different feel for each person, and that's another art, is putting together the right people to come out with this one sound. Same thing, obviously, with you.
Absolutely. And I'm very fortunate to have the team that I have.
Yeah, I can see that you really enjoy that aspect of it too.
I do.
So what about personally, do you, maybe this is not a smart question. The answer is probably yes, that you enjoy cooking personally at home, or is there a point where, although you love it so much, you've been doing it all day, you just want to take a break? And I mean, what is that like for you?
I actually, it's the latter. I actually don't cook at home.
Not at all. Okay.
No, apart from the weekend. Sundays, I like to give my wife rest. But otherwise, I actually don't cook at all at home. My wife picks it up, and she does that.
Is she a good cook?
She's an amazing cook.
Better be the answer that you give.
No. And strangely enough, we only started cooking. I mean, she only started cooking very late. Because we used to live in these, small islands and what have you, where we didn't have to cook. But she's a great cook. Yeah. So she picks that up during the week. She does amazingly well. And then I give her a rest on a Sunday. But I do like to cook sometimes at home. But sometimes, the home cooking, it sort of limits me sometimes. Because you're dealing with the same kind of equipment. Yeah. It's an ongoing discussion that my wife and I have. She says that I make the kitchen a mess.
I'll bet you have a really nice kitchen too.
I'd have a fairly decent kitchen.
It's interesting. You probably know Sylvia Weinstock.
I do.
Yeah, she's been on the show too, and we had a conversation where she's actually shut down her business. However, she's now dealing with licensing, and she's traveling around the world, and they contract the licensing. Then she comes in and trains for a certain period of another time. And then it's Sylvia Weinstock Cakes. She was telling me how she wants to sell her building. She's in Tribeca and buy an apartment all on one floor. And she's already designed her kitchen, and her eyes lit up when she was telling me about this kitchen that she designed. She can't wait to find a space where she can do this. And that's one of the things she now wants to just spend a lot of time on, is these wonderful dinner parties.
I think a home kitchen is, I can see this moving forward, because, a home kitchen is where a lot of things should come alive. I mean, as a society, we are sort of losing a lot of community very quickly because of our dependence to technology and small
social
families,
media, all of that.
So, and if there is one place where we can reclaim our community, it's the kitchens. I can guarantee you that.
And can you say more about that?
I mean, you encourage your younger members of your family in cooking, make them part of the dining. And I think this is one art which, at the end of the day, let's face it, whether we eat a quick meal or an extended meal, everybody has to eat to survive.
Yeah.
So that's not going away.
Right.
Okay. Like I think it was Jack Welch who said in his or it is Lee Iacocca, one of them, who said in his book that when the times are hard, get into food business. But end of the day, people have to eat.
That's great. Right.
So the eating is not going away. All of us have to eat somewhere or the other. Now, we probably, instead of inventing another activity for the family, which nobody's interested in.
Yeah.
We're better off investing in a good kitchen.
Interesting. Yeah.
And a good dining practice. If it is a dinner time, or if it is a weekend where families get together and eat and celebrate dining.
Yeah.
So a home kitchen is probably the one most important space.
So in your home with your kids, you have a couple kids, you said?
Yes. So we always, so I don't, unfortunately, I don't get to eat dinners together every night with my kids because I finish late.
Yes.
But we make it a point that when I have a day off for a couple, we're always eating together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Also, you're talking about this sense of community. I'm thinking of this film. Did you ever see Babette's Feast?
No, I didn't.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I have not.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. We'll put this in the show notes too, a link to how to find it. But it's this wonderful film. If I remember correctly, it's been a long time, but you're making me think of it. It was this, she was supposed to be this wonderful, very well-known French chef who had, and this is years and years ago. I don't remember the time. Maybe it was the early 1900s, something, or the 20s, 30s, something like that. But anyway, she left Paris, I think, where she was a very well-known chef. She went to this small little village where the villagers, sense of community, especially back then, was even more important in tiny little village in France. And they were very puritanical. They were very conservative and uptight, this village. And so she did not reveal who she was. She was just this one. And she started, I think, as a housekeeper. And it got to the point where for these two, if I remember correctly, these two older women who she was a housekeeper for, she decided she wanted to, make a feast and for the town. The town is like 25 people. And again, they're very puritanical, kind of uptight, conservative people. And she started somehow, it's such a beautiful movie, to get the townspeople involved without really knowing what they were getting into helping collect all the elements, all the different kind of foods and the herbs, and people were collecting it. And she started to involve them in the kitchen. Of course, she was the main one. But in the end, they still didn't really understand till they sat down at this big rectangular table and she started to serve the meal. And you watch this, I'm giving away the whole film, but it's still worth watching. Little by little, as they were, and they would also have some wine, but each dish, you would see their faces, because they were very, very uptight, sitting on their chairs and very proper, right? And they'd start to eat the meal and their eyes would kind of look around at each other because it became like a sensual experience. And so eventually they're all talking and it kind of broke this conservative thing with them, and they all started interacting with each other and they're laughing, and it was this wonderful emotional, and in a sense she had transformed the town, and then she left It was just this beautiful, beautiful film.
So there's no better icebreaker than food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just put it that way. I mean, there's no better. I mean, there's most of our favorite memories are around food.
Mm.
Okay. I mean, you would think about, I mean, let's say you moved into a new neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
How does people welcome you? By baking a pie or a cake. I mean, that's been going on forever.
That's right.
And nobody planned it.
Yeah. That's interesting.
You have any occasion, personal, there's always food.
Yeah.
So it's always been there. My hope is that people now, I mean, unfortunately it comes to a stage where now we have to do it consciously and reclaim some of those habits. Which hopefully keep us all alive around food.
Yeah. Well, so Ashfer, before we close, can you tell me a little more about this meal that I'm about to experience?
I think we've talked quite a bit about
we have
seafood
and
vegetarian. So I think we will just focus on these two as our main ingredients.
Wonderful.
And I'll, given the fact that we are in the spring-summer transition, I like to cook seasonal food.
Okay.
What is in season.
Yeah.
So we'd keep it seasonal in flavors, and I'll let you have a taste of couple of dishes that we normally do for our events.
Ah, wonderful. I can't wait.
Does that work?
Yes, it absolutely works. And thank you so much. This has been I'm not a very good cook. I want to get better, but I love to eat. I'm a professional eater.
That's the kind of people I like.
Thank you for listening to this re-release of an earlier episode on the wedding biz. If you enjoyed it, please share it with 3 friends or colleagues who you think would also benefit from hearing it. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Wedding Biz. And you can follow me on Clubhouse at Andy Kushner. And be sure to join the Wedding Biz Club on Clubhouse. We'll catch you next time on The Wedding Biz.